Half the world's population is confused about what diet they should eat, what hormones they should focus on. Should they eat low fat, high fat, moderate fat? Is iodine an essential nutrient, or is iodine poison? I've got an excellent guest with me today. We're going to talk about all these topics and probably more. She's a brilliant doctor. This is Dr. Elizabeth Bright. I think she's currently in Italy. Is that correct, Dr. Bright?
Yes, I am, Dr. Canberry.
I thought so. Welcome. We've been trying for 2 years to make this conversation happen, and there was always a hang up, usually on my part. It's a pleasure to finally have you here, Dr. Elizabeth Bright. Now, I think most people watching this know you, but give us a 30-second CV for those few who don't.
Okay, I'm an osteopath and a naturopath, and I started the carnivore diet at 52 when I went into menopause. And I since right around that time, I wrote The Good Fat is Good for Women, Menopause, and then last year I published Good Fat is Good for Girls, Puberty and Adolescence.
Yes, and I'm going to have links to those things and Dr. Bright's other links in the show notes below after this video. This video is being recorded live in front of our private community. We have thousands of folks in there trying to reclaim their health by eating a proper human diet. And they're going to actually get to ask Dr. Bright questions during this Q&A. Just regular folks on YouTube will not have that privilege. So in the future, I'm always recommending and interviewing some of the leaders in the world when it comes to diet and nutrition and vitamins and minerals. And so if you'd like the opportunity in the future to ask your personal questions to some of these thought leaders, then consider becoming a tribe member. There's a link down in the show notes. Now, you mentioned menopause, and I think that's a great place to start. You started menopause, you said around 52.
10 years ago in 2 months. I'll be 62 in January.
62. So this is what 62 should look like, guys, and act like. So if you're 62 and you don't feel and act like this, then listen up, pay close attention. Has the age that the average woman enters menopause, has that changed? Because we know that puberty is happening younger and younger, and I think that's a huge problem for girls. Has the age of onset of perimenopause, menopause, has that changed over the decades and the centuries?
It has. As you're right, and my second book actually talks about how precocious puberty is a huge problem for a woman for the rest of her life. Menopause was, people, Hippocrates and all the old Greeks and doctors through history have written that menopause happens around your 50s. We do know that women are going into precocious early menopause. I would like to say, though, that perimenopause doesn't really exist. It was invented in the 80s by hormone pharmaceutical companies.
Big Pharma invented that term because they had a drug that would treat the symptoms. Is that right?
That's right. They wanted to get as many women as possible on hormone replacement therapy.
We see that so many times. We see that in osteopenia. We see it in perimenopause. We see it in ADHD. We see it in insomnia. We see it in anxiety, where they've got this great drug they need to market, and in order to do so, they have to have a new diagnosis in the ICD-10. And so all of a sudden, we see this huge media blitz, and then there's this new diagnosis. Restless leg syndrome is another one. These things have been around forever and are directly related to people's diet. But then all of a sudden, when they have a new pharmaceutical that they can make billions on, all of a sudden there's this new condition. So precocious menopause. Now, tell me why perimenopause, why is that not a real thing? Why is that not a real diagnosis?
Well, we go into menopause in order to live a long, healthy life. So chimps, for instance, don't have menopause.
Right.
Or, human women, I should say, and a couple of whale species go into menopause. It actually enables us to live a long, not fruitful, not fecund life. The reason that we don't have babies forever is because it's incredibly nutritionally expensive, and chimp females die in their 50s because they keep having babies until they die. So the human female evolved to have menopause as a benefit, to keep on living and taking our grandchildren to the hunting grounds, we could say.
Yep. And this is actually a very well-known theory in evolutionary biology. It's called the grandmother hypothesis. And I think it may be about to be elevated to a theory that basically women stop being reproductive so that they can be better aunts and great aunts and grandmothers, so that they can actually, and that's actually more evolutionarily fit than continuing to have new babies into older life. They can actually increase the odds that their children and grandchildren will not only live, but reproduce and have successful reproductions. And I don't think that's talked about often enough. Most people medicalize or pathologize menopause, like, oh, menopause is a condition that, it's pathology that you need to treat. It's actually not the case. But the reason that many women buy that is because their menopausal symptoms are so severe, literally. And so let's first of all talk about the symptoms of menopause, because I've been treating hormonal conditions in women with bioidentical hormones before I knew about the diet angle. Most women think that the first symptom of menopause is night sweats and hot flashes. Yeah. And for most women, you've already been in perimenopause or early menopause for years when you start to have the night sweats and hot flushes. Those are not the first symptoms of menopause. What are the symptoms of menopause that women should be looking for? The very first symptoms.
None of these symptoms are related to menopause. So hot flashes are, if you're 12 and the cute boy walks by, you're going to have a hot flash, right? So it's really a vasomotor reaction to, you could say, a stress state. So the reason why women are having these symptoms earlier is because they stop eating fat. They stop eating fat in the 80s, and animal fat is what all our hormones are made out of. So if you don't eat it, there's no way you can make it. Our liver makes a small amount, but that doesn't cover the needs of cholesterol for brain tissue, myelin sheaths, and stress. The stress response is made out of cholesterol.
Yes. So if a woman's watching this and she's having severe menopausal symptoms, what dietary intervention, dietary strategy would you recommend that woman try immediately?
Eat a lot of animal fat. And that's why my book is called Good Fat is Good for Women, because it really is. I mean, women do need more fat than men. We make more hormones than men, just like women need more iodine than men, because during adolescence, we grow more sexual characteristics, more tissue expands during a female puberty. So instead, women are the ones who are not eating any fat because they're yo-yo dieting, and they think that the calorie equals the energy that they're going to have to put in their bodies. Unfortunately, it really is the cause of their menopausal symptoms are high cortisol, not enough fat.
And we're going to definitely cover iodine later, because you're one of the few doctors, you and I and just a very few others, talk about iodine, which I find fascinating, but also quite worrisome because it's such an important mineral. Susan, one of our tribe members, says, Dr. Bright, do you consider that the way to replenish your hormones is to adopt a high fat and a lower meat portion diet?
I do. I usually recommend 80-20. That's what I eat. That's what I've been eating since 52. I do exercise, but I don't eat the protein I think I'm pretty muscular.
You are. I've met Dr. Bright in person. She's very fit.
And I think that, but you also have to address stress levels, because your stress, the cortisol levels will just eat up the hormones that you're trying to eat the cholesterol to produce those steroid hormones. So, if you look at the steroid, I'm sure, you've seen it a million times, the steroid hormone cascade, the left side is all the stress response. And if you're constantly using those hormones up to address stress, they won't get to the right side of that cascade, which is your testosterone and your estrogens.
What does a typical day of eating look like for you? And I would suspect that that's the diet you would recommend for any woman who's getting close to the age of menopause.
Well, I would actually recommend it for any woman and also adolescent. I wake up, I have a decaf coffee with my husband now puts an egg yolk and 2 tablespoons of butter. I go paddleboarding for an hour. I do about 6K. And then I come back and I work all day long. I may have a snack, tallow with some like beef jerky with butter, or tallow with a little bit of meat on it. I have about 4 to 6 ounces of steak with some butter for lunch, and the same for dinner.
I love that. And so you go out of your way to add fat every time you eat anything.
I do, because I'm in Italy and we can't get really good ribeye like you can get in the States.
Right. Excellent seafood in the parts of Italy I've been to, but red meat's a little harder to come by. You mentioned adolescent girls, young women. So you're not saying that just only menopausal age women should eat this high-fat carnivore diet. You're saying that we should start our young daughters on a high-fat carnivore diet to help with their hormone optimization, even at very early ages.
Yes, and with the caveat that obviously the woman who is in her 50s is going to have a lot more inflammation than your 12-year-old. So I also see this as an anti-inflammatory approach to address years of dieting, spinning, marathons, things that raise your cortisol level. I wouldn't say that a 12-year-old or a young girl has had experienced that much stress unless she's experienced trauma. So you definitely need, you wouldn't have to be, I'm sure you can have a small amount of carbohydrates depending upon the situation. I have seen young girls who needed to eat a lot more fat and remove the carbohydrates for some health conditions that they had, especially depression.
Yeah. The two things I see the biggest signal from, and as a primary care doctor, you're probably the same way. I look for, when I recommend something to patients and I see them back in 3 months or 6 months, I look for signal. Did that move the needle? Did that improve anything? Did it make anything worse? And in my decades of prescribing lots of pharmaceuticals, I saw the needle move very little signal. But when I started recommending dietary interventions, the needle moves significantly. And two things in young girls, let's say anywhere around pubertal age, is acne and mental health. The signal to noise ratio is huge in young girls who have severe acne or who really have trouble with anxiety, depression, or other mental health issues. That's where I see the biggest signal. Is that your experience as well?
Absolutely. If you're talking about acne, it's obviously a hormone imbalance. You're making more androgen hormones than you are the other. They're all supposed to be balanced. So if you're not eating the fat, and you may have a thyroid condition, possibly, you're not having enough iodine, definitely, you wouldn't be able to properly synthesize the quantity of each of those hormones that you need. And those hormones I don't call them sex steroids. I just call them steroids. They're not, estrogen isn't associated with being a female, just as testosterone isn't associated with being a male. We have receptors all over our body looking for those hormones, different quantities, and our body knows how to synthesize them at the rate we need for when we need it.
Yeah, both men and women make testosterone and estrogen. Both men and women have testosterone receptors and insulin receptors, and they're usually very widespread throughout the body. But we've been trained to talk about testosterone as a male hormone and estrogen as a female hormone, but it really just comes down to the ratios that you make and the ratios that you keep with regards to being male or female. Do women, well, let's stick to menopausal age women for right now. Do women need carbohydrates for their hormone health? Do they need to carb cycle? Is that a myth? Is there some truth to that?
No, there's absolutely no truth to that. Absolutely no truth to that. There's no nutritional value in carbohydrates. Everything that we need is everything that we humans evolved to consume comes from animals.
One of the biggest things I've noticed in the carnivore community is the number of women who not only when they go carnivore, they have significant improvements, but they're also very vocal about that. And it seems like that directly goes against kind of the mainstream genre of, the smiling woman eating a salad. But the female carnivores, nobody's surprised if a man eats a carnivore diet. It's like, yeah, you're a stupid man. You're going to eat meat, of course. But when women say, I eat only fatty meat, that seems to fly in the face of a lot of popular convention. But women get so much benefit from it. What would you say to a woman who's having significant symptoms in their 40s, 50s, 60s? Should they cower to the mainstream narrative that meat is for men, or should they own that as part of their own feminine identity and say, no, I'm going to eat the fatty meat?
Well, it is part of their feminine identity because they need it, but this all started in the 1800s. Women were associated with salads, you could say, vegetable, and meat was sexualized. Eating meat was sexualized. So the Victorians did not want women to, this is with the whole Kellogg thing and this thing. So the idea of, oh my God, women eating meat would make them think carnal thoughts, which actually, besides the fact that obviously it's just silly, that is basically the time that women as in Western society were told and instructed by doctors not to eat meat. Yep. Now, unfortunately, women also get less meat in all societies because of the man has to go out and work. The women are home with 7 kids, building houses and working on the farm, but the men are supposedly doing the heavy lifting. Now, women always, in all societies, get less meat. So I think our society just turned that into, a philosophy to actually just have women get less meat, even though we need it. We need it desperately.
And I actually think that the authorities in the Victorian era, I think they were correct. Not in their advice to women, but I think that when a woman does eat enough fatty meat and have enough fat in her diet to optimize her hormones, I think it does increase her sex drive. I think it does make her think about sex. I think it does probably make her more willing to want to have sex. In the Victorian era, that was frowned upon. Women were supposed to look at sex as a chore, something you did for your husband. Otherwise, you didn't think about it. But I think modern women wouldn't mind having a sex drive, and they wouldn't mind enjoying sex at all ages. And that's a problem for some, authorities. But I don't think that should be a problem. I think women should embrace their sexuality and their sex drive and should enjoy sex. Why is that such a big problem, even today in 2024, for some of the authorities out there?
It all goes back to medicine was basically invented in the 1800s, right? Modern medicine, it was invented in the 1800s. If you think about, absolutely, libido is affected by your hormones. It's all made out of steroid hormones. I hear a lot of women having issues with vaginal dryness, for instance. That's a symptom associated with menopause. It actually is related to cortisol. If you have high cortisol levels, all your mucus is going to go to your limbs to run from danger. So your nasal mucus, your eye mucus, your intestinal mucus, and your vaginal mucus is just going to go away from those tissues. Now, if you're in a high cortisol state, many people are at night because they have imbalanced cortisol, especially if they're eating carbohydrates, they will have vaginal dryness and they will associate it with menopause. And then they'll go on hormone replacement therapy, which all it does is raise their cortisol levels. Scientifically, it just raises their cortisol levels.
So my current advice to women of menopausal age, when they start to have symptoms, is to first of all try a very high-fat carnivore diet first for 90 days. If that fixes all your symptoms, great. If it doesn't, then continue to eat a diet rich in animal fat and animal protein, but consider bioidentical hormone optimization. That's my current recommendation to people. Susan, one of our tribe members, says, is it correct, Dr. Bright, that you do not believe that menopausal women need bioidentical hormones, or do you think there's a place for that in certain situations?
I honestly don't, because if you eat fat, you're making your own hormones at the rate that you need. Obviously, you have to have adequate iodine levels in order to have your thyroid be able to figure out how many hormones to make, because T3 hormone actually regulates which steroid molecules are synthesized. Now, bioidentical hormones are plant sterols.
Yep.
Our body's receptors recognize cholesterol. So those are the sterols that our receptors are really looking for.
Yeah, they're actually made from a wild Mexican yam in most cases. And even though they are the bioidentical, same exact molecule as the molecules our body makes, they do come from plants. Now, another good question here from Meta. She's had her ovaries and uterus surgically removed. Now, the adrenal glands in women can make some of the sex hormones, but do they make enough? What about a woman like Meta?
They actually make 5 to 90%. So we know this actually from Labree's work in the 80s, when they chemically castrated men who had prostate cancer. They looked at their testosterone levels afterwards, and they saw, gosh, these guys still have testosterone. How is that possible? Same exact thing in women. So most of our hormones, most of our adrenal hormones are made all our sex steroids are made in the adrenals all our lives. It is during pregnancy, when an egg is fertilized, that the ovaries really come into focus to build the placenta and do all of that work. But all of the rest of the time, it's the adrenals. So even with surgical menopause, you are still, if you eat fat and you have reduce your stress, minimize your stress, you will be able to make those hormones that you need in your adrenals.
Excellent. Excellent. Now let's talk about the thyroid gland. Let's talk about iodine. Here's a great question. Susan says, I'm taking 2% Lugol's to shrink benign nodules on my thyroid. I take 10 drops a day. Should I take more?
That's 5 drops of 5%. I mean, I would do the Hakala Lab iodine test to see if you have fluoride and halides attached to your receptors. Yep. Maybe the iodine's not able to park in those iodine parking places.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up fluoride. I think this is about to become a very talked about topic. I don't know if you saw in the United States, there was a recent court case that said fluoridated water that's a problem. We need to rethink that and relook at that. I'm not sure if they put fluoride in the water in Italy or not, but here in America, many communities, you have no choice. If you drink city water, municipal water, there's going to be fluoride in the water, and that's a huge problem, not only for children's IQ, but also for thyroid health. Walk us through how, if you're drinking fluoridated water, if you're cooking with fluoridated water, how does that affect thyroid health?
Well, it interferes with the absorption of iodine. The thyroid cannot make thyroid hormone from fluoride. It can only make it from iodine. And that goes for bromide and chloride. Now, Ireland is another place where they have a huge issue with fluoride. In the UK, only certain areas, but Ireland is mandated to have fluoride in their water, and they have a huge issue with congenital hypothyroidism there, diabetes, fluorosis, and bone fractures. Fluorosis causes all of this. And the problem with Ireland, though, is that not only the water, but they also drink a lot of tea. So it's a perfect storm, fluorosis. Right.
And so many people, if they drink a lot of tea, many tea leaves naturally will concentrate fluoride in the tea leaves. Mm-hmm. And so if you're drinking a lot of tea and you're making that tea with fluoridated water, you're actually getting a mega dose of fluoride. And so I recommend, I have a blanket recommendation. Nobody needs to drink fluoridated water. Not any woman, not a pregnant woman, not a breastfeeding woman, not a menopausal woman. Everybody needs to drink fluoride-free water and start their children on fluoride-free water. The benefits to the human brain, to the human thyroid, and to the other hormone cascades, I think there are ways that drinking fluoride-free water benefits the human organism that we haven't even discovered yet, because fluoride has been considered crucial, vital for so many decades that nobody studied that. So how do you keep the fluoride out of your system personally?
If you once you have, well, there's a salt loading protocol that can, with iodine and salt, you can remove the halides that are attached to your iodine receptors. I just basically take my iodine every day, Lugol's, and the fluoride can't get in. It's, it's my iodine's already receptors.
Yeah, all your receptors are saturated. Yeah, and so to getting enough iodine in your diet, either through foods or a supplement, is vital. But many people forget that second piece, which is if your body's saturated with fluoride, the iodine's not going to be able to attach to the receptors. What do you think about the skin patch testing for iodine? I currently recommend a 24-hour urine for iodine to see how your iodine levels. Can we do the skin patch testing or not?
Well, in Europe, we don't have a Hockler lab. So I do recommend the skin patch testing because I actually had somebody who did both and they were identical. The results were identical. So I do recommend, in the absence of, obviously, if somebody's in America, I might recommend that they do the Hockler lab test, a 24-hour uptake test. But if you don't have that available to you, the skin patch test is just fine.
Gotcha. And do you think people can get enough iodine in their diet by just eating the right foods, or does virtually everyone need to supplement?
Virtually, unfortunately, in our world today with the pollution, I would say, even the minimum dose is higher than it would have been in the 80s. We have PFAs that are in our water supply, inescapable all over the world. So I really do think that people do need to supplement. I don't think that our food sources are adequate anymore.
Yeah. And I think in many cases, there's just no iodine in the soil. And in other cases, the soil has been so improperly farmed for so many decades that either the iodine's depleted or it's so locked up because of the decreased fungal growth in the soil that it's not accessible to the plants, to get in the animals. Most people, if they live within 20 miles of a coastline and they eat locally grown meats and then lots of seafood, they can probably get enough iodine. But you really have to go out of your way to get the iodine from just dietary sources. And I think that's very sad. I hope that's not always going to be the case. I hope in the future we can heal the soil and have enough iodine. But for many cases, that's just it's not the case. So many doctors, Dr. Bright, don't realize that every human cell that's ever been studied has something called a sodium iodide symporter on it. And it's not just about thyroid. It's not just about mammary glands. It's not just about salivary glands. Every human cell that's ever been studied needs iodine. How much do you recommend that the average woman in her 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, how much iodine does she need to try to get a day?
Honestly, I would say 4 drops of 5%, because we also know that iodine depletes in a state of stress. So I can't think of any woman today in the modern world who doesn't have more stress than she can handle.
A year or two back on Twitter, I tweeted, there is no such thing as iodine allergy in human. You may have reacted to iodinated contrast media. You may have reacted to seafood, but you are not allergic to iodine. And you should have seen the MDs and PhDs and registered dietitians losing their shit replying to me. Is there such a thing as a true iodine allergy in a human being?
No, there is not. As we spoke about, the receptors are taken, or you can actually have an inflamed thyroid. It's one of the signs if somebody has a nodule. You'll have a reaction to the iodine, not because you don't need it. It's because you needed it yesterday.
Yep. There's a very prominent thyroid health guru. She's written a couple of books and she's right about a lot of stuff. But one of the things she says that I take huge exception to is that people who've been diagnosed with Hashimoto's should never supplement iodine. Do you agree with that?
No, I do not. I do not.
Tell us why. Tell us why. Even someone with Hashimoto's needs iodine.
Because the thyroid is inflamed Your immune system needs iodine. Like, as you said, every cell needs iodine. Your immune system has gone rogue in a exaggerated stress response. So it's making antibodies to attack your tissues. Avoiding iodine is just going to make that inflammation worse. They actually documented that Hashimoto's got worse in the US when they started using iodized salt. So iodized salt has crappy iodine in it and not enough. So actually they saw that there was a rise in Hashimoto's cases in the US when they added sodium iodide to salt.
Yep. And the iodized salt basically they designed it to have just enough iodine so that it would keep you from having a large goiter. Back around World War I, that's when that happened, because so many of the young guys they wanted to recruit to send to war had a huge goiter in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, and places like that called the goiter belt. So they didn't put enough iodine in the salt to give you enough. They just put in enough so you didn't have a big goiter. And the Carnivore Mommy, one of our tribe members, she said that Dr. Berry's even increased his intake. I have. And I've had Dr. Brownstein on the channel, interviewed him. You're well aware of his work. And I read that 15 years ago, and I'm like, yeah, iodine's a big deal. But I was still, from my allopathic training, very gingerly like, yeah, let's do 1 or 2 drops of 2% a day. I don't know if that, I don't want you to take too much. But as years went by, I keep increasing the amount that I recommend for people. And you just saw one of our tribe members taking 10 drops of 2% a day, which would be about 4 or 5 drops of 5%. And I keep increasing my recommendation, and I keep having tribe members that are like, I'm doing, 5 drops of 5% a day, and I feel amazing. Is that safe? And I'm like, yeah, it's fine. Keep doing it. It's fine. What do you think about let's call them mega doses that Dr. Brownstein would recommend of 25 milligrams or 50 milligrams a day? Do you have a problem with that recommendation, or do you think in some cases that's warranted?
Well, I don't, because I have books from the 40s and 30s that have indicated, that's when, which tissue takes how many milligrams of iodine. We do know that iodine is a water soluble mineral, and any excess comes out in your urine. I think that if you don't need it, you'll pee it out. So yeah, I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, perfect. What about iodine that's sourced from kelp? That's Mitchell's question. Do you think that's a problem? And if so, why?
Well, I don't actually, but Lugol's kelp has arsenic in it, right? We know that there's a source. These are a source of. Unfortunately, our seas are not very clean anymore. My grandson there in Glasgow, and one of the huge industry in Scotland in that time in Glasgow was the production of iodine from kelp. But today, I don't know. But Lugol's is safer because it's potassium iodide and elemental organic iodine. So if you're getting it from kelp, you may get some other substances with it.
Oh, I totally agree. It's so sad that our oceans are in the condition that they're currently in. Do we need to take iodine? CJ asked, can we take it all at once, or does it need to be spread out over the day to increase absorption?
I don't think so. I think in the morning is when our hormones are peaking. Cortisol and thyroid hormones are peaking. That's when we have the huge bump, the peak in cortisol. If you think that stress needs more iodine, and that's what we're going to do, be busy as bees, that is kind of the time that you would want to have more iodine. And if it does wake up your thyroid, you don't want to have it at night, in the sense that it is going to make you more active. I personally take it in gelatin caps. You wouldn't want to be swigging a liter of iodine. That is very corrosive, right? So it is corrosive. You don't want to put it on your tongue. So you definitely want to put water or put it in gelatin caps. Yeah,
Lugol's solution can stain your teeth semi-permanently. So never put the drops full strength in directly into your mouth. Always dilute that is my recommendation. I've actually, Bonnie Blue, our daughter, is a little over 2, and I give her 1 drop of 2% a day, and Beckett is going to be 5 very shortly, and I give him 1 or 2 drops a day. I kind of alternate. Do you have any problem or hesitation supplementing a child with iodine?
Absolutely not. I think you should.
And then this question from Susan: what about your pets, Dr. Bright? If you have any, do you give them iodine?
Well, we know that hypothyroidism is a huge issue with cats and dogs,
Yep.
primarily because we feed them dog food. But I don't know everything. We know that all vertebrate organisms need iodine, so I don't see it being a problem.
Yeah, me either. And I'll tell the listeners, I give all 5 of our pets. They all get a little iodine, a drop of Lugol's here and there in their meat diet. Yeah, I think that's probably, and I'm sure that the average veterinarian would lose their shit over that, but I think that makes perfect evolutionary sense to do that. What about iodine with regards in the menopausal woman, or the woman who's about to enter menopause? Is it more important, or is it just as important? Are there any special caveats for a woman of menopausal age with regards to iodine?
No, I would say it would be most important during puberty. Absolutely. That's where we're building our sexual characteristics. We're not building any sexual characteristics during menopause. We're just sort of stopping bleeding. That's all we're doing. We're just stopping fecundity. We're stopping the ability to have babies. Other than that, I mean, no, you don't need any more during menopause, but you definitely need it during puberty.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the more I've actually read some compelling research out of Europe that a child's IQ is directly affected. That's why I supplement Bonnie and Beckett, and even my other children. When the Berry Girl trio, when they were in their teenage years, every time I made them scrambled eggs, they got a couple of drops of 2% Lugol's in their scrambled eggs. I never told them; they never knew. Now that they're adults, they supplement iodine because I told them later that I did that. But you know how kids and teenagers, if they see you put something in the food, all of a sudden the food's yucky. So I just pulled the ninja parent strategy, and I would just put it in the scrambled eggs. They never knew it. It helped them develop their brain and their hormone cascade, help their thyroid. I think every parent should supplement their children. Are there any medical conditions? Are there any genetic defects where you would say, no, we don't need to supplement iodine? Or is your mantra, if you're a human being, you need iodine supplementation?
That's my mantra. I mean, no, actually, you talk about Europe, but it was Evelyn B. Mann in the U.S. in the 40s who did all those tests with iodine and pregnant women. And the IQ of the child was directly related to the iodine content in the mother's blood. So
yeah,
absolutely.
And we're talking about 10 IQ points here in some of these studies, that if you get sufficient iodine, and then I would also opine that you probably need to keep all the fluoride out, you can increase your child's IQ by 10 points. And it's not like you're going to give them more. What you're basically doing is you're giving their brain the freedom and the nutrition it needs to develop what its natural IQ would have been anyway. You're not like hacking the system. All children are supposed to be bright. That's just how evolution works that way. It doesn't make dumb creatures. But if the brain is retarded by lack of iodine or by too much fluoride, then you're going to wind up with a lower IQ child, and that's going to be sticky for the rest of their life. Just like the hormone issues, if a young girl doesn't get enough iodine, those problems are going to be sticky for the rest of their life. What about somebody, Dr. Bright, who has Hashimoto's thyroiditis? Is it safe for them to just start supplementing iodine, or should they work with a doctor? Is there some danger to doing that?
I don't really think there's any danger, but I do think they need to start low and slow. So maybe start with 1 drop or a drop diluted, or put it in food so you slow the absorption down. They'll know pretty much. And then to recommend the salt loading protocol, you wash the iodine, you wash the halides out with the iodine and the salt, so that those receptors are free for the iodine to attach to.
I love it. So Terry's got a 13-year-old daughter, and she wants to start supplementing her. She has had her period since just after she turned 12. She's been a carnivore for 6 months. How much iodine would you supplement Terry's 13-year-old daughter with?
I would say, because she had her period so young, I would say a little bit more than somebody who didn't have their period so young. I would say 4 drops of 5% to get through puberty without any problems.
Every day, four drops of 5% Lugol's.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. Wendy wants to know, do you think iodine deficiency has anything to do with the mental health disease epidemic that we're seeing, the bipolar, the schizophrenia, anxiety, depression? What research have you seen? What insights have you had?
Well, absolutely. The thyroid causes bipolar syndrome and very, very much associated with schizophrenia. There was a book that came out in the 80s called Thyroid Psychiatry and Thyroiditis. This is something by Jaffe and Levitt that they actually call themselves psychothyroidologies. So this did not hit. They wanted to get people, they talked about how people who had took T3 could reduce their medication. Obviously, this didn't go down very well with pharmaceutical companies.
Right. And I think for so many people, just coming to food is the ultimate medicine, supplement a certain few things. It feels weird to them, Dr. Bright, that we're talking about eating fatty meat and adding fat to it, supplementing iodine, because most people our age and younger, their entire reality has been painted for them by the pharmaceutical sponsored mainstream media. That's all they know. That's their reality. That's their Plato's wall in the cave, is they just see what's been on TV, what's been in magazines. And this feels so weird, so faddish. What would you say to somebody who's just discovered carnivore and they're looking at it, they're carnivore curious, let's say, and they're like, oh God, I've watched Dr. Berry's iodine video. It seems like it's super important, but nobody's talking about this. They're not talking about this on CNN, Fox News, MSNBC. They're not talking about this in the New York Times. What would you say to somebody to help them wake up that's just now carnivore curious and iodine curious?
Well, basically, we say question authority. We have to look at how the human species evolved, and that we understand that these obstacles to our health. I mean, osteopathy and naturopathy just means removing obstacles to healing. And going back to our DNA template, which definitely isn't medications and carbs. I mean, look at the obstetrical dilemma. They talk about that too. Why is it so dangerous for women to have babies? Because their hips changed when they started eating grain.
Yeah, no other mammal on planet Earth has the problems with childbirth that humans have. No other mammalian species has the rate of infant mortality that humans have. And I agree with you. I think that the agricultural devolution, I think that's directly responsible for all the problems we have with childbirth. And so do you think it's possible that if we have a new generation of children who are getting enough iodine, who are eating enough meat, are we going to create a kind of a new class of human, Dr. Bright, that if they grow up getting plenty of iodine from birth onwards, eating enough fatty meat from birth onwards, how is that child, when they get to their late teens and early 20s, how are they going to be different from the teens and 20-somethings that we see in today's society? What's your prediction?
Well, they won't be new humans. They will be the old humans. They will be the actual humans that they were born to be, which is their DNA, and they won't have mental health issues that we're seeing. That's what I mean. When we read about school shootings, and we don't have the right to look into their medical record, what medication were they on and what was going on. I mean, it's very upsetting to see these things and know that this kind of diet and something silly and cheap like iodine, which is why they hate it, could make such a difference.
Yeah, and I've actually predicted before that when this new generation of kids who are eating a meat-heavy ketogenic diet or a carnivore diet or just full carnivore, they're going to have special classes for them if they go to public school, because they literally will be so far ahead of the other kids. Do you think getting enough iodine and eating enough fatty meat, does that make us smarter humans? Does that make us harder to control? Do you think that will make us a problem for the powers that be?
No, I think that we will be more peaceful when we're not anxious and full of anger. I think we'll solve issues better. No, I think that we know that fat makes us smart. Our brain calms down and we will not be difficult. We will just take over the control from the people who are not eating like us.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think all the future leaders will get enough iodine and enough fatty meat when they're children. They'll just be natural leaders and they won't be such warmongers. There's so much, this online. There are people who are like, no, don't eat so much fat. If you want to be carnivore, eat high protein, just moderate fat or even low fat in some cases. One of our tribe members, Deborah, has a question. So much conflicting information. What do you think for a woman over 60? What's the optimal fat to protein ratio, and what would that look like in an average meal or an average day of eating?
Well, I'm over 60 and I'm eating this way. I do think that people who have inflammatory conditions would need more fat. I would say that if I counted, maybe some days I would be eating 75-25, some days I'd be eating 80-20. It really depends on the activities, what kind of stress you're under, and what kind of inflammatory conditions you have. It's an anti-inflammatory diet. And then after that, it's how you get your energy. So I'll want more fat when I'm traveling or babysitting for my grandson than I will just on a normal day when I'm not doing all these things.
We have somebody who's supplementing. Who is this? Margie. Even though I was supplementing with Lugol's, my iodine level dropped from 60 down to 36. What's Margie doing wrong?
How did she test? I mean, is it all?
I think she did a 24-hour urine. I think is what she did.
Lots of stress, or how old is she? She's
in her 60s, and I would say she's probably not supplementing with enough iodine. Mm-hmm. That would be my guess.
Definitely, you just burn through it if you're not, if you need more.
Yep, absolutely. Are there any problems if somebody starts very gingerly with iodine supplementation? Let's say that they're still worried because they've heard so much negative stuff and they just do 1 or 2 drops of 2% a day. My current belief is that's going to be better than not supplementing at all. But can that cause any problems if you are supplementing but just not supplementing enough?
Well, we could look at it this way. We can sort of, it depends on the inflammation. Again, if you don't have an inflamed thyroid, it might be a problem if you're not supplementing enough. Just as we know that when you're changing the status quo, if your thyroid all of a sudden starts making hormone and it wants to make more, you've had not enough thyroid hormone for all this time, you may lose your hair, for instance, just because your thyroid, all these tissues are saying we need more iodine.
Gotcha. Is there a danger from supplementing with too much iodine? Is that a danger for any particular people or people in general? There are some people who are saying, yeah, supplement, but if you use too much, it can cause problems.
Well, we discussed Hashimoto's, and that is not the issue. Again, if you have thyroid nodules or an inflamed thyroid and you don't know it, you might wake up the thyroid and you're going to have to treat the thyroid.
Gotcha. But so you don't know of any instance, any particular diagnosis where you would say, don't supplement too much, limit how much you supplement?
No, I don't.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you for that. Let's talk about the vegan diet. Let's talk about a plant-based diet. Do you think, as a doctor, it's possible for somebody to eat a varied enough and colorful enough plant-based vegan diet for it to give them all the nutrition they need?
Absolutely not. The colors don't have anything to do with it. The phyto colors that they're always finding do this or antioxidant that. You can eat all the pomegranates you want, but you will not be healthy. No, I do not. There's no fat. Again, the plant sterols, you cannot make hormones out of avocado oil. You cannot make hormones out of flaxseed. I mean, you can make the wrong kind. You can actually those are estrogenic, and they're also interfering with thyroid function. But absolutely not. I think it's the most unhealthy thing you can do, especially for women.
Yeah, and we see this, with vegan influencers. They lose their period, and it's so common in vegan women that some sub-factions of the vegan diet community actually say that that's a good sign if you stop having your period, because that means you've washed all the toxins out of your body. I'm not joking. That's actually a real thing that's said in some corners of the vegan community. And to me, that's the preeminent signal from your body that you're super unhealthy. You are so unhealthy, you're not allowed to procreate. What if somebody on a vegan diet's eating lots of kelp, if they're supplementing with avocado oil, coconut oil, olive oil, are they still not going to get enough of the nutrition they need?
They never will, because those receptors are looking for cholesterol, and cholesterol only comes from animal fat.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now let's talk about dairy.
Oh,
Now, full disclosure here, I love milk. I love dairy. I love all things dairy. But my current belief is that if you're a child, you probably will benefit from drinking milk. If you're an adult human, you need to be very cautious with any dairy except just pure dairy fat. I think the pure butter or ghee is probably fine for most people, but drinking milk, eating a lot of cheese, what's your current belief on this?
I actually reissued my book, Good as Fat for Good as Fat. Good fat is good for women. It's really late here. Menopause, because I had the first issue had a lot of dairy in it as snacks. It's too inflammatory. So we know that A2 milk is slightly better, but it still has a quantity of caseinomorphins. I agree with you. The fat part is fine. Give the buttermilk to somebody else. Just keep the butter. But we do know that in Keith Woodford's book, The Devil in Milk, 2 tablespoons of milk equals a shot of heroin as far as opiate concentration. So caseinomorphins. So I do not recommend it for adults. No, it's inflammatory. Inflammatory condition. Sorry.
No, it's fine. There are many types of cheese that actually concentrate the casomorphins. Mm-hmm. And so that for many people, and I let me just say, I'm a dairy and cheese addict. I have to severely limit it. If we've got a refrigerator full of heavy cream and ricotta cheese and cheddar and Swiss, I'm going to eat it every day. I freaking love it. I'm probably addicted to the casomorphins. What about, so you think A2 milk, A2 is less bad than A1 milk? Slightly less bad. Yeah, that's exactly how I describe it too.
We didn't evolve. We didn't evolve. We're the only animal that eats another animal's milk. If you can find breast milk cheese, go ahead. But it is too difficult. It is hard on our system. And if you have inflammation, it's the worst thing to do. I'm not saying that you can't ever have it. But yes, I think you are addicted to it because it is very addictive. I've had people cry when I tell them they should take out dairy for a month. Yep.
It's terrible when you tell a cheese lover that may be the problem. That may be why you have ongoing joint inflammation or ongoing skin inflammation. It's probably the dairy. What about, now there's a big sub-faction in the carnivore community who thinks that raw milk is the answer to the inflammation caused by milk. What do you think about raw milk, raw dairy?
I don't agree. With the pasteurization of milk, we're just talking about enzymes. We're not affecting the milk proteins. It's the milk proteins that are inflammatory.
Yes. It's the caseins and the wheys that, especially the caseins and wheys, because I would even argue that if somebody made cheese out of human breast milk as an adult, I think that would still be inflammatory to many, many people. But then especially when you start getting the foreign caseins and wheys from cow dairy or I think goat dairy is probably less inflammatory for most people. Doesn't make it uninflammatory, just makes it less inflammatory. But when you start getting the caseins and the wheys from other species, for so many of us, that's going to cause joint inflammation, skin inflammation, gut inflammation, or mental health issues. So what does your diet look like with regards to dairy?
Just butter. I just eat butter, lots of it. So, I make my own tallow, but I really don't. We gave up cheese 3-4 years ago.
Yeah, and we've greatly decreased the cheese intake in this household, and I'm still sad about it, but I know that my joints are less inflamed when I just don't eat the dairy. What about fasting? Let's talk about fasting, because I know it's very late there. I won't keep you much longer, but let's talk about fasting. And we'll use case studies. We've got a 50-year-old woman who's 200 pounds overweight. and she's just eating the standard American diet. She saw a video by me, saw a video by you, and she's like, okay, I want to lose all this weight and get healthy. Does she need to do some intermittent fasting, or should she avoid it altogether? What would you recommend just to a 50-year-old woman who's 200 pounds overweight?
I don't recommend fasting, intermittent or otherwise, because it raises cortisol levels. So I think that one of the reasons why people hold on to weight is because cortisol, weight is energy. It is energy to be consumed when you need to run. And in order to make your body understand that you don't need to hold on to that energy, there's a lot of work that has to be done.
Gotcha. And so you don't and let's talk about our definition of fasting.
Mm-hmm.
Is fasting when you just don't eat because you're not hungry? Like I typically break my fast around 4 p.m. Like right now, I haven't eaten today and it's noon here, 1 p.m. I'm not hungry. Is that fasting, or is that not technically fasting if I'm not eating, but also I'm just not hungry? Or is fasting just going too many hours without eating, whether you're hungry or not, in your opinion?
It depends on where you're coming from. You're healthy and you don't have inflammation. Somebody who has menopausal symptoms, for instance, that would be bad for them because it would mess with their cortisol levels that are already messed up. So it really depends on the state of your health and your stress response.
Got it. Let's see. Here's a very common question. People love protein supplements, Dr. Bright. They love whey protein. They love to drink protein shakes. One of our tribe members, Deborah, said, so whey protein powder is as bad as milk?
Absolutely. It is purified protein. It is an isolate. None of the nutrients that we're supposed to take in when we eat protein.
Yes, I totally agree. Whey protein is at best a waste of money, but it's actually concentrated dairy protein. And so for most people, it's going to be even more inflammatory than if they just drank the milk. Yeah, please stop that, Deborah, if you're using whey protein powder supplements. Dr. Bright, thank you so much for staying up late. I know it's very late there where you're at. Give us your closing thoughts, keeping in mind the 40, 50, 60-year-old woman who's either about to enter menopause, in menopause, or postmenopausal. Tell these women what they need to know to reclaim their health and to be as fit as you are, to be as mentally clear as you are, to be as vibrant as you are. What do they need to do?
They need to eat animal fat and lots of it.
I love it. I'm going to put a link to all of Dr. Bright's stuff down in the show notes, guys. If you know a woman, please share this video with them, because I think Dr. Bright made it very clear that women of all ages need lots of animal fat and they need lots of iodine if they're going to realize their best health. Dr. Bright, thank you so much for doing this. Go to bed.
Thank you, Dr. Ken.
Thank you very much. Sweet dreams. And thank you guys for sharing this video.